You are Muhammad Ali. The year is 1967. You are 25 years old, undefeated at 29 and 0, and you are the heavyweight champion of the world. In less than an hour, a United States Army officer is going to call your name and ask you to step forward. If you step forward, you keep everything. Your title, your freedom, your money. If you stand still, you lose it all. And right now, standing in a room full of strangers on San Jacinto Street, in Houston, Texas, you are not sure what your feet are going to do. Let us back up. Because this moment did not come out of nowhere. It has been building for 14 months. And to understand the weight of it, you need to know what is sitting on your shoulders. 3 weeks ago, you knocked out Zora Fali in the 7th round. That was your 9th successful title defense. In 1966 alone, you defended the belt 5 times, against 5 different men in 5 different countries. The Cleveland-Williams fight last November at the Astrodome might be the single greatest performance any heavyweight has ever produced. You landed over 100 punches. Williams hit you 3 times. 35,000 people watched it happen live, and nobody who saw it could argue you were anything less than the most dominant fighter alive. Your purses are climbing fast. You earned $585,000 for the Ernie Terrell fight. You have a title defense against Oscar Bonavena scheduled for May in Tokyo. Main Bout, Inc., your promotion company, controls the closed-circuit television rights to every fight you take. The money is real and it is accelerating. At 25, you are on a trajectory to become the highest-paid athlete in the history of professional sports. That trajectory depends on one thing. You have to keep fighting, and that is the problem. Because the United States government wants you to fight somewhere else. Here is how you got here. You registered for the draft at 18, same as everyone. In January 1964, you took the Armed Forces qualifying exam and scored below the threshold. You were classified 1Y, which meant you were only eligible in a national emergency. You joked about it at the time, said you were the greatest, not the smartest. For 2 years, the draft was not your problem. Then Vietnam got worse. By 1966 draft, inductions hit 382,000, the highest levels of the war. The Army needed bodies, so they lowered the qualifying standards. On February 17, 1966, your local board in Louisville reclassified you 1A, eligible for immediate induction. Just like that, the exemption vanished. When reporters asked you about it that day, you said something that would follow you for the rest of your life. You said you had no quarrel with the Viet Cong. You said no Viet Cong ever called you a slur. That sentence turned you from a controversial athlete into something more dangerous. A black man with a platform who was willing to say the war was not his fight. The reaction was immediate. Sports Illustrated called you a demagogue. Television host David Susskind called you a disgrace to your country. Jackie Robinson, the man who had integrated baseball, said you were hurting the morale of black soldiers in Vietnam. The mail came in bags. Most of it was not friendly, but the draft was not just a public relations crisis. It was a legal one. You filed for conscientious objector status in August 1966, claiming exemption as a minister of the Nation of Islam. Your local board rejected it. You appealed. A retired judge named Lawrence Grauman held a special hearing, questioned you at length, and concluded that your religious objection was sincere. He recommended the claim be sustained. The Department of Justice overruled him. They said you failed all 3 tests for conscientious objector status. The appeal board denied your claim without giving a single reason. Every administrative door closed. By early 1967, you had exhausted your legal options. The induction notice arrived. Report to Houston, April 28th. Now here's what most people watching this story from the outside did not understand. They thought you had 2 choices, step forward or refuse, serve or go to jail. But the real map of your options was more complicated than that and also more suffocating. Option 1, accept induction, report for duty. You almost certainly would not see combat. The government had offered you what they offered Joe Louis in World War II. A uniform, a pair of gloves, and a tour of military bases doing exhibition fights. You could keep boxing in some form. You would avoid prison. The public would call you a patriot. Your career would survive. Option 2, Take the deal your promoter Bob Arum had arranged. His law partner had negotiated a specific arrangement with the government. Perform boxing exhibitions for the troops and the draft charges go away. No prison, no conviction. You go back to the ring and the money keeps flowing. Option 3. Keep fighting in court. Your lawyers, Hayden Covington and Chauncey Eskridge, were among the best draft law attorneys in the country. Covington had won dozens of cases for Jehovah's Witnesses. Eskridge had counseled Martin Luther King Jr. They could file more appeals, seek more delays, try to run out the clock, or find a procedural crack. Option 4. Just step forward. Do it quietly. Serve your time in some back office, keep your head down, and come out the other side with your record clean and your boxing license intact. Any rational person looking at the cost-benefit math would pick one of those 4. You keep your title, you keep your freedom, you keep the millions of dollars waiting for you in the ring. And yet, there is a 5th option, the one that destroys everything. Refuse. Publicly. Stand in that room with the other inductees and do not move when they call your name. Here is the part that makes this decision harder than it looks from the outside. You are not making this choice in a vacuum. You are making it inside a system that has you surrounded. The Nation of Islam controls your life in ways most people do not see. Herbert Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad's son, is your manager. He runs Mainbout, Inc. He controls your fight contracts, your television deals, your money. Elijah Muhammad himself has told you that you cannot serve in what he calls a white man's war. That is not a suggestion. Elijah Muhammad went to prison for resisting the draft in World War II. He expects you to do the same. And you know what happens to people who disobey Elijah Muhammad. Malcolm X was your friend. He recruited you into the nation. He was the reason you joined. And when Malcolm split from Elijah, he was shot dead in a ballroom in Harlem. 3 Nation of Islam members were convicted of his murder. After your own press secretary gave information to the FBI about that killing, he turned up dead too. A month before the induction ceremony, you sat with Sugar Ray Robinson, one of the greatest fighters who ever lived, and Robinson told you to take the deal. Just step forward, do the exhibitions, keep your life. And you told him the truth. You said Elijah Muhammad told you that you cannot go. And then you said something Robinson never forgot. You said you were afraid. Real afraid. Robinson later said you were not afraid of prison. You were afraid of being killed by the Muslims. So, this is the trap. If you step forward, the government leaves you alone, but the Nation of Islam does not. If you refuse, the government comes for your freedom and your money, but the nation lets you live. The comfortable middle options, the exhibition deals, the quiet compliance, all of them violate Elijah Muhammad's directive. And you have seen what happens when that line is crossed, but here is what makes it even more tangled. It is not only fear, you also believe it. When you talk about the war, you are not reading a script. You are speaking from something real. You have said it a dozen different ways. Why should you travel 10,000 miles to drop bombs on brown people when black people in Louisville are treated like dogs? That is not a line someone wrote for you. That is what you see when you look at the world. So which is it? Are you a man of conscience who would refuse the draft regardless of what Elijah Muhammad said? Or are you a man trapped by an organization that will kill you if you disobey? The honest answer is that both of those things are true at the same time. And nobody standing in that room in Houston can separate them. Now stop for a moment. Put yourself in those shoes. You are 25. You are the best in the world at what you do. Every option that preserves your career requires you to defy the people who control your life and have already demonstrated they are willing to kill. The one option that keeps you safe from them guarantees a felony conviction, up to 5 years in federal prison, the loss of your title, the loss of your boxing license in all 50 states, the confiscation of your passport, and the end of your income. A majority of the American public thinks you are wrong. The courts have already ruled against you at every level. There is no cavalry coming. What do? Here is what happened. At just before 8 in the morning on April 28, 1967, you arrived by taxi at the Armed Forces Examining and Entrance Station. Reporters and cameras were everywhere. You said nothing. You walked inside and completed the physical examination without incident. Then you were lined up with the other inductees, somewhere between 7 and 12 young men, standing shoulder to shoulder. Lieutenant Stephen Dunkley stepped forward and explained the procedure. When your name was called, you were to step forward. That step constituted legal acceptance of induction into the United States Army. Each man's name was called. Each man stepped forward. Then they called yours. You did not move. They called it again. Your feet stayed where they were. A third time. Nothing. An officer escorted you to a separate room. They told you what you already knew. What you had just done was a federal felony. 5 years in prison. $10,000 fine. They gave you a chance to reconsider. They brought you back out for another opportunity to step forward. You declined. Then you sat down and wrote a statement by hand. It said, I refuse to be inducted into the armed forces of the United States because I claim to be exempt as a minister of the religion of Islam. You signed it and walked out of the building. The punishment came fast, faster than anyone expected. That same day, the New York State Athletic Commission suspended your boxing license. The World Boxing Association stripped your heavyweight title. Texas followed, then every other state. Your passport was seized. This all happened before you were even charged with a crime, let alone convicted. No trial, no jury, no due process. Just an instant, coordinated erasure. On May 8th, a federal grand jury indicted you. On June 20th, you stood trial before Judge Joe Ingram in Houston. The jury was all white. They deliberated for 21 minutes. Guilty. Judge Ingram gave you the maximum sentence. 5 years, $10,000 fine. That same day, Congress voted 337 to 29 to extend the draft 4 more years. You were released on bail pending appeal, but the boxing ban held. Your last fight had been March 22nd against Foley. You would not fight again until October 26th, 1970. 3.5 years. Age 25 to 28. The years every boxing expert agrees are a heavyweight's physical prime. During the exile, you had almost no income. You accepted $10,000 for a filmed fantasy bout against Rocky Marciano. You traveled to college campuses giving speeches, earning a fraction of what a single fight would have paid. The man who had been the most marketable athlete in the world was driving from campus to campus just to keep the lights on. And here is what the exile cost beyond money. When you came back, you were different. The blinding speed was gone. The head movement that had made the Williams fight a masterpiece could not be replicated. Your post-ban career forced you to fight a different way. The rope-a-dope, the willingness to absorb punishment, that was not a tactical innovation. It was a necessity. You could no longer slip punches the way you could at 25. Many boxing analysts believe the accumulated damage from those later fights accelerated the Parkinson's disease that would define your final decades. The appeal crawled through the courts. The Fifth Circuit upheld the conviction in May 1968. Your legal team pushed it to the Supreme Court. The case Clay versus United States reached oral arguments on April 19, 1971, 4 years after you stood still in Houston. What happened inside? The Supreme Court is one of the strangest turns in American legal history. Justice Thurgood Marshall recused himself. The remaining 8 justices voted 5-3 to uphold your conviction. You were going to prison. Justice John Marshall Harlan was assigned to write the majority opinion. His law clerk handed him a copy of Message to the Black Man in America, Elijah Muhammad's book. Harlan read it, and he changed his mind. He became convinced your conscientious objection was sincere and that the Department of Justice had mischaracterized your beliefs. He switched his vote. The count moved to 4-4. A tie would have been a disaster. It would have affirmed the conviction without explanation, sent you to prison with nothing on the record. Justice Potter Stewart found a way out. He proposed reversing the conviction on narrow procedural grounds. The appeal board had never stated its reasons for denying your conscientious objector claim. The DOJ had given 3 grounds for denial, 2 of which the government now admitted were wrong. Since nobody could determine which ground the board had actually relied on, the entire process was tainted. The other justices came around. The final vote was 8-0. Conviction reversed. You were free. But think about what that turned on. One law clerk handing one book to one justice who happened to read it. If Harlan does not pick up that book, you go to prison. The arc of your entire life, everything that comes after, the Frazier fights, the Foreman fight, the Olympic torch in Atlanta watched by 3.5 billion people, all of it hung on a single judge deciding to read one more document. You did not know any of that would happen. Standing in that room in Houston in 1967, every piece of evidence said the system would crush you. You had no path to legal victory. You had no reason to believe the Supreme Court would intervene. The administrative process had rejected you at every level. The public was against you. The boxing establishment had already decided to erase you before you were even charged. What you had was a convergence of pressures so tangled that the cleanest path, the one that kept you alive, was also the one that cost you everything else. You were afraid of the Nation of Islam and you believed in its message. You were threatened by your own community and you spoke for your community. You were a man of conscience who was also a man under coercion. Those things were not contradictions. They were the same moment. 14 years later, you lit the Olympic flame in Atlanta. Your hands trembled from the Parkinson's. The crowd was silent, then erupted. The man who had been called a traitor, a coward, a disgrace, a criminal, stood in front of the entire world, and the world stood up for him. But none of that was in the room in Houston. In the room in Houston, there was just a 25-year-old man, a line on the floor, and a name being called 3 times into silence.